Ms. LaViolette, I think we were just talking about the baptism when,
Yes.
when Jodi was baptized. And with regard to the baptism, you were saying that she believed it was very a spiritual, important occasion?
Yes.
All right, and what do you know happened after the baptism?
Well, there was an opportunity for Mr. Alexander to pursue her, and they had sex after the baptism.
Okay, and was this back at her house?
I believe it was.
Okay, and where, or not where, what type of sex did they have?
They had anal sex.
Okay, and did she describe for you what her thoughts were about that?
She described to me, she told me that Mr. Alexander told her that anal and oral sex were not sins or as sinful, and that the real sin was vaginal sex, and so that they could have oral and anal sex.
And so do you start to see any kind of conflict going on with her?
Well, I think the conflict is that there is sex, and she's now part of that. She's in a sexual relationship. She's not supposed to be sexual in the same way, but she's got a spiritual mentor who's telling her that this sex isn't so bad and they can do this. And so she's now implicated. She's now part of it.
All right. And after they have anal intercourse, does Mr. Alexander leave her?
I believe he does.
Okay. I want to talk to you. You said that in your review of this case, have you reviewed emails?
Yes, I have.
And have you reviewed emails between Mr. Alexander and Miss Arias?
Yes, I have.
And have you reviewed emails between, well, both of them, right? Vice versa?
Right.
Okay. Ms. LaViolette, I'm showing you an email with what's been marked as Exhibit 559. Just let me know if you need to review it.
I actually need my glasses.
Okay.
And may I go get them?
Judge, may she get her glasses, please?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and I don't need you to review the email just yet because I want to ask you some questions first, okay?
All right.
All right. Did Jodi speak to you about an occasion when Mr. Alexander made a surprise visit to her?
Yes, she did.
And was Mr. Alexander with a friend of his, Dan Freeman?
She and Dan Freeman came and surprised Miss Arias at her home.
Okay. And did she talk to you about that surprise visit then? And
Yes,
what it
she
meant
did.
to her?
Well, it was a nice surprise. She wasn't ready for it, but it certainly was something that she felt good about. Although they came very late at night, and she said she was in ratty pajamas and needed to fix herself up, and Mr. Alexander and Mr. Freeman, I believe, went to the Hughes house, and Miss Arias joined them later.
Oh, and joined them at the Hughes later?
Yes.
Okay. And was this about in January of 2007?
Ye-
Was this about in January of 2007?
Yes, it was.
All right. And did you review in working, did you review an email dated January 7th, 2007?
Yes, I did.
And is that an email from Miss Arias to Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
All right. And if you need to review the email, let me know. Miss LaViolette. let me know if you need to review it, okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do, because I read so many emails that I would like to review it.
Okay, because I'm going to ask you the importance of this email for you. Do you need to review that to refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I just started reading it. I remember it.
Okay, all right. So this is an email from whom?
It's an email from Miss Arias to Mr. It's an email from Miss Arias to Mr. Alexander.
All right. And what is the context of the email? What is Miss Arias discussing?
She's discussing really the limits of the relationship. She wants to find out what the relationship is, what the relationship, how to define it. And she wants to know whether it's monogamous, that she's generally monogamous, and that she hasn't been with anyone but herself, but Mr. Alexander since Mr. Brewer. And she wants to know what he wants from her.
All right. Is this important to you, this particular email?
This email, and I'm not...
Go ahead if you need to continue reviewing it.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is Miss Arias talking about should she, the type of relationship, and are they both monogamous?
Yes, she's asking about...
Approach. You may continue.
Miss LaViolette, in the beginnings of this relationship, do you see any seeds of jealousy coming from Mr. Alexander?
I think less subtle or more subtle seeds of jealousy. One of the things Miss Arias is asking for is clarification about the relationship, because she hasn't been in the dating game, is what she basically says, that she hasn't dated a lot.
Yeah, the scope.
Judge,
Sustained as to that response. You may.
in summary, is that what she's saying?
In summary, she's saying in the email,
Overruled.
in summary, she's saying in the email that she hasn't been dating, that she's been monogamous and has not had the experience of dating numerous people at one time, but that that she's wondering that although he says it's okay to do that, she keeps getting the feeling from him that it's not okay and that she feels guilty and that somehow she's betraying him. What I get from that,
Why is that important to you, Ms. LaViolet?
it's important to me because there's a saying in the, I don't know if it's in all the world, but in the clinical world, that 90% of all communication is nonverbal. And that one of the things that we're looking at is the communication, apparently by Mr. Alexander, that although he says it's okay for her to date.
That's the email.
Approach, please. May continue.
Thank you, Judge. We were talking about if you see any seeds of jealousy in reviewing this email. And so in reviewing this email, does Ms. Arias feel as though she shouldn't be going to out with other men even though she's not in a fully committed relationship with Mr. Alexander?
Yes, Miss Arias believes that she's getting some messages from him that it's not okay, but she also says that it's not what she's usually doing, is dating more than one person at a time, and she's not used to doing that. So she's got some conflict about what that is, but she says that and she also talks about not having, that it's hard for her to say to somebody, it's easier to say, I have a boyfriend.
Is this also evidence that in reviewing this email, you were about to tell us what she also says. Is this also information that you're telling us why you see seeds of jealousy and how Miss Arias feels?
Yes, this is in the email.
Okay, please tell us.
That she's not used to dating more than one person at a time, and so that part of that is difficult for her, and that it's also hard for her to say, I'm not interested, if she can't say I have a boyfriend. It's easier for her to say I have a boyfriend than it is to say I'm not interested.
Okay, does that speak to you at all with regard to her boundaries or vulnerability or anything like that?
Well, that it's difficult for her to, I think, hurt somebody's feelings. She talks about not want to hurting him, and it's hard for her to hurt other people. So I don't think, I think it's not just boundaries, I think it's experience. If your experience is that you date one person at a time and you don't date multiply, it's kind of difficult to date more than one person at a time if you're not used to dating more than one person at a time.
Okay. All right, and did you review emails from Chris and Sky Hughes to Mr. Alexander?
Yes, I did.
And did you review information from these emails towards the end of January of 2007?
Yes, I did.
And at this point in time, based on your information, was Miss Arias in contact with the Hughes? Had she met? She's obviously met them one of the first weekend, right?
She met them and they liked her.
Okay. And after that, had she seen them again? Do you know if they had contact?
I believe they've seen each other again.
Okay.
But I don't know the extent of that.
Okay. And based on your review of the emails, did they know who she was?
They knew who she was.
All right. Judge, may I approach? I'm handing you what's been marked as Exhibit 560. Let me know if you need to review it, okay? I'm going to ask you questions about it.
All right.
All right. Did you review emails that went back and forth? It's basically a string of emails between Chris and Sky Hughes and Travis Alexander.
Yes.
All right. And with regard to that review, was this email important to you in your consideration about the progression of the relationship between Mr. Alexander and Miss Arias?
Yes, it was.
All right. Let's talk about why. What is it that you relied on in this email that is important to you?
Well, I relied on a number of things. Chris and Sky Hughes were very important to Mr. Alexander. He had a close relationship with him. They had a 5-year friendship. So in terms of what I read, they seemed to be as close to him as anyone else in regards to the emails I read. And they had status with him. What they thought of him was important. Miss Arias also liked them quite a bit, and they seemed to reciprocate in that regard as well.
Okay. So in your understanding, was their opinion important to Mr. Alexander?
Their opinion was important to Alexander and Mr. Alexander, and they definitely had an opinion.
Okay. And in reviewing the email, what is it about this string of emails that speaks to you with regard to their relationship?
Well, a number of things. There are a number of issues addressed in the email, but the Hughes are talking about their,
Approach, please.
Ms. Violet, in reading through this email string between Travis and Chris and Sky Hughes, we don't need to read through the whole thing, but or quote from it necessarily. But what do you get about the substance of this email string that's important?
well, this is an incomplete email stream,
Okay.
but I know what was said in the emails going back and forth. I can certainly sum it up.
Does it continue on to January 31st?
It does, but there's a double copy of the top email, and there's missing emails here.
Okay.
Okay. So
So you
page
read
2, 3, 2, 3, and 4 are duplications of the first three 3 pages, they're the same.
Okay. And then you know that it goes, there's emails from January 31st?
Yes.
Okay.
And the first email was actually,
For her.
Let's
oh, I'm sorry.
talk about the first email.
Okay. The first email, the subject is "You Crossed the Line," and it's an email from Mr. Alexander to the Hughes because they talked to Jodi, and basically the conversation was from Mr. Alexander's perspective and the way he interpreted it, which I don't think is too far off base, is that they told her,
Foundation as to how she knows Mr. Alexander.
Sustained.
We're going to talk about summaries. So when you say that they told her, what you're talking about is a summary, is that right?
yes.
You're not quoting from the email? You're
No.
not exactly giving us the exact quote, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so the summary of what you're getting from the email. Go ahead, please.
The summary basically is that Mr. Alexander is saying that you basically told,
Judge, just because she's saying doesn't mean she's quoting.
Which, please. continue.
Ms. Leia, I just want to be clear. I know when you say he said or you're talking about that, you're not quoting from the email, is that right?
Objection, lady.
Overruled.
I'm actually taking the written word and summarizing it.
Okay. All right. So let's try this again. The email that we're talking about, the first email. Is it important? I want to talk to you about what's important in there. What type, the context of the email and the subject matter of the email. What does it tell you with regard to their relationship? And again, please don't quote.
I'm not quoting.
Okay.
The synopsis is that Mr. Alexander has written to his friends.
Objection. Beyond the scope of the question, hearsay and relevance.
Restate the question.
What's the importance of the email?
Importance of the email is that Mr. Alexander has responded to the Hughes, and the Hughes have basically indicated to Miss Arias,
Hearsay.
Overruled.
they have basically advised Miss Arias to move on from the relationship.
Rule 703.
Overruled. That answer may stand.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Ms. Violet? What did the Hughes advise Miss Arias to do?
They advised her to move on from the relationship, that Mr. Alexander has been abusive to women.
It's indicated in there. And
Sustained.
Does that miss the question with regard to whether or not the Hugheses thought that Mr. Alexander had previously been abusive with women? Is that important to you?
Yes, it is.
And does that help you to formulate an opinion ultimately about the type of relationship that this ended up to be?
Yes, it does.
And so in this email, is there information contained in the email about whether or not Mr. Alexander's closest friends thought that he had issues with women?
Yes, there is.
All right. And what type of behaviors were the issues that Mr. Alexander seemed to have based on what his friends thought?
objection, hearsay. Specific 703.
Realize that it's her opinion.
Approach, please.
Ms. LaViolette, contained in that email string, is there an email from Kristen Sky Hughes to Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Okay. And in that email, is there important information to you about what other people think or see how Travis is treating Jodi?
Yes.
And what is that information that is important to you?
Information about his prior treatment of other women.
Okay.
Information about her fear of telling him anything that she has a problem with because he may reject her, that she doesn't have an opening to tell them.
Okay.
Information that about his childhood that they think has greatly affected him in relationship to women.
The type of childhood he had?
Yes. Information about other specific women that he has been with and the way he has treated them. In fact, information that said...
You're not going to quote, are you?
No, I'm going to paraphrase.
Okay.
Can I paraphrase?
Overruled.
Information that Mrs. Hughes, Sky Hughes, gave that said if Mr. Alexander wanted to date... Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The objection is?
Hearsay said. Use
It's
the
already
word
been,
said.
it's already been ruled on. She's paraphrasing.
Ms. LaViolette, are you quoting something? Are you,
No, I'm not.
you're indicating the type of information provided?
I am.
All right, you may continue.
That if Mrs. Hughes' sister wanted to date Mr. Alexander, that she would forbid it.
And is that based on some of the behaviors that they see Mr. Alexander doing with other women as well as Jodi?
Yes,
Is that,
Yes.
is that a yes?
yes, that's a yes.
Okay. And so is that the important information that's contained in this email for you?
There's more in-depth information that goes into some of the things they have observed about Mr. Alexander's refusal to look.
Sustained.
Is there other information that you considered and contained in these emails?
The details of his refusal to look at his childhood and his responses about him maybe needing counseling and being willing to look at them.
I'm sorry, what did you say? His responses of what?
The response that actually Mr. Alexander gave, his interpretation that they thought he needed counseling, which they also indicated that he thought that he was greatly affected by his childhood and he was afraid to look at it because he was afraid it would make him look weak.
Okay. Is there any other information that you considered important to your evaluation of the relationship contained in these emails?
There was reference to a particular woman and his manipulation of that woman. There was information about Mr. Alexander calling Miss Arias a skank and then acting like it was a joke. There was information about the way he ignored her in public places and would not allow her to put pictures of them up in places where other people could see them. Just basic ways that he treated her, or they felt he mistreated her, that they actually said, that they indicated were abusive, that he called rough around the edges and they called abusive.
When there's an objection, please stop talking.
And lack of foundation.
Counsel, please approach. May continue.
Based on the information that you read with regard to the behaviors that the Hugheses noticed with regard to Mr. Alexander and Ms. Arias, do you consider any of this type of behavior abusive? Or can you make that assessment at this point?
I'm making an assessment I'm using that information in a context of other information to make an assessment.
Okay, so is this...
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And it's significant because these are two people who he values most in his life, apparently at this time, and who also very much value him.
Okay, and so is this information something that is important to you when you're considering, like you said, with the context of everything going on?
Yes, it is.
All right. So this is probably a good time.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, next week, would any of you be unavailable to start at 9:30 each day? Anyone who could not start at 9:30? Again, there's no court this afternoon, no court on Monday. Tuesday, you need to be back here at 9:30. At this time, I would like you to go back to the jury room. We are going to be speaking with you individually, but please go back to the jury room. Remember the admonition. We're at recess. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. You may step down, Ms. LaViolette. Counsel, I will see you in chambers.